red corner, blue corner. Right here on Stadium, I got my guy Jake Butt sitting right here with me. The Michigan great tight end, was a captain, a true leader of men up there in Ann Arbor.
And I got my man Joshua Perry, also a captain, a national champion, and the man that we need to help us break down the big matchup for his alma mater, Ohio State versus Penn State this weekend.
Yeah, there's a huge game, as you mentioned. It's going to be played at noon. I know there's a lot of consternation about that amongst Buckeye fans. Maybe Penn State fans happy that they get to go on the road and not play at night against Ohio State, but we've got that one coming up. And you and I have decided that both of these teams are very good, right?
Yes.
There's a lot to like about either one of them. The Penn State defense is playing on a completely different level right now. I think Ohio State has taken steps on that side of the ball. But when we start to break down the offenses, there are questions, and I think we're going to help you answer some of them today. Before we get started on that, we wanted to welcome you guys in. Of course, get in that YouTube chat. We'll play your comments through here, and we want you to scan the QR code on the screen and answer the poll question for us today: who wins on Saturday versus Ohio State and Penn State? But let's start with Ohio State's run game, right? I think Kyle McCord is a question mark in this game, but the guys that he's throwing it to, I think, give confidence. But as we look at Ohio State's run game, offensive line has been challenged this year. Last week they played Purdue without TreVeyon Henderson. Mayan Williams, Chip Trayanum gets hurt in that football game, averaging just 135 yards on the ground per game. I mean, what are you seeing here? Like, what stands out to you about the run game?
To me, it stood out to me going back to the offseason when the conversation was, how do they replace C.J. Stroud? And I said, before we talk about this, we have to say, how do you replace 3 offensive linemen that got drafted? And my theory was they would struggle there. And that theory has been proven true. And the big reason that this applies is they had a lot of success on the run game last year. Remember that TreVeyon Henderson gash that kind of opened the game up late in the fourth quarter? They're going to need to do that. About 75% of the struggles for the Buckeyes, I have to put on the offensive line. I haven't seen 60 minutes of dominance. I haven't seen 60 minutes of O-line unit quality play. And the fearful thing for Buckeye fans, I'm not saying this is going to cost them the game, but it's a huge thing. You're playing against the fastest defensive front that I've seen in college football this year. They present a lot of challenges. They need the run game to get going to play complementary football. But for another reason, Joshua, you do not want to be in obvious passing situations against this Manny Diaz-led Penn State defense. They will bring the pressure. That will be on the offensive line.
I agree with you on that. I think as much as you can help Kyle McCord with establishing run, it's going to be important. And I'm also there with you that a lot of the issues for the offense goes back to the offensive line. I look at 2 games, and I think they tell different stories. Against Notre Dame, Ohio State had their best rushing game in terms of yards per carry against a Power 5 opponent this year. They were, 4.6 or something in that neighborhood. Not lighting the world on fire, but certainly keeps you on schedule when you can run it like that. Then you go to the Maryland game where they were held under 2 yards per carry. I think part of that was schematic. I think there was also, reviewing the tape, the offensive line struggled to climb because the Maryland defensive line, grabbing some guys up front. You got to be better than that, right? You can't let that be an excuse. What also happened against Maryland is that was the first game where we didn't get to see TreVeyon Henderson. You and I talked about this, and I think this is the biggest thing for me, is when you start to evaluate an offensive line like Ohio State's, the gaps go like this. They go like this. They go like this. They're not open for this long, and then they come together. They go like this. You know the guy who's been hitting it the hardest this year for the Buckeyes? It's TreVeyon Henderson. He's got that burst. He's got that speed. It's a different gear when he has the ball in his hands. I think his health is going to be paramount to Ohio State's ability to establish a run.
There's another piece of this, too, because I look at Penn State's defense, and that's a downhill defense. When you run laterally, that plays into Penn State hands. They have the speed to run laterally with you. When I look at the film, one of the weakest points of Penn State is their interior defensive line. When a team's downhill, sometimes you just want to run it right into the teeth. So, yes, TreVeyon Henderson. Another piece of this is that's your veteran. He's one of your best pass-protecting running backs. That matter. Here's one stat for you. Penn State averaging 4.5 sacks per game. That's #1 nationally. 4.5 sacks per game. Why does that matter? Well, the run game isn't just about the run game. It's to help out Kyle McCord. There's 2 Kyle McCords. There's the Kyle McCord with the clean pocket. Here's his numbers. 70% completion rate, 11 yards per completion.
Yep.
Kyle McCord under pressure.
Go ahead.
38% completion.
Not good.
Not even 2 yards per attempt. When Ohio State has faced 6 or more rushers this year, 50% of the time they're giving up pressure. You need the run game to get in favorable passing situations, and you need the run game to help complement a passing attack to get Penn State on their heels. You do not want to sit back and let that defensive front roll.
We got to save those numbers there because you bring up a really interesting point in the pass game when I know this is a run game show right now. If Kyle McCord makes Penn State pay early on when they bring pressure, it's going to hurt them really bad because they've got good cover guys. Ohio State's got really good receivers. That's a battle to watch. We'll probably dive into tomorrow. Now I want to talk about the Penn State side of this thing because their run game has certainly struggled too. And you've got, Kaytron Allen, Nick Singleton. We're talking about maybe the best running back room in the United States of America. Kaytron Allen only has one game of 100 yards or more on the ground. Nick Singleton hasn't broken the century mark yet this season. They're averaging, Singleton is averaging 3.8 yards per carry this year. He was close to 7 a year ago.
Stat.
And they don't have the explosive runs. They don't get the runs over 20 yards here. Why can't they get the ground game going is the question.
It's a few different things. And you think about what makes up an explosive run. It's not just the O-line and tight ends. Really, to take a 5-yard run and turn it into explosive, what you're looking at is wide receiver blocking. They need to dig out the safeties and ear hole them. They need to block downfield. And then it's on your running backs to make someone miss. In order to make someone miss, you need space. So that part of it's on the O-line. But I will play devil's advocate here because I want to look at this from another perspective.
Yep.
Just like with Jim Knowles' defense, in order to be aggressive, you have to give something up. You're a little bit vulnerable in the back end. Okay, in order to be explosive, you have to give something up. You take a risk. Okay, they're not explosive, but they don't have negative plays. There's a stat called stuff rate, meaning when you call a run, how often do you get 0 or few yards on the run? Penn State is second best nationally. They rarely go backwards. So by that measure, even if you get 2 yards on first and second down, now you're in 3rd and 6. You don't need an explosive to convert. You can play right into your game. So I think Penn State, even though they don't have these explosives, they're happy getting into 3rd and manageable, and they feel really good that they can convert.
Yeah, I just think it becomes a problem, right? Because I asked the question, what defense have they faced this year that is close to what Ohio State has?
None.
Because, and I think the idea that they have not shown that they can be explosive. I mean, if I'm Ohio State, I am giving them all they can handle early on in the game, and I'm saying prove it, right? I'm trying to take the air out of that offense. And I think part of the reason why they have struggled to run the football is because they haven't been explosive throwing the football either. Why wouldn't I play my safeties close to the line of scrimmage? Why wouldn't I have them ready to trigger and run support? Right, there's not a wide receiver on that roster that scares me. And Drew Aller, for all the great things he did against West Virginia early on in the year, he hasn't gotten it done throwing the football as of late in terms of being a guy who can push it down the field. It becomes an intriguing back and forth to me because I think they are comfortable being on schedule, but also to this point, they haven't. I don't think they've been forced into a scenario where they have to maybe feel that urgency on offense to have that explosive.
Yeah, and that's something that has to. I think we both agree we're interested in this game. This is a game where I think both teams are saving something for the opponent.
No doubt.
So we'll see how that unfolds. We do have a viewer question here, Joshua. I think this is really interesting. Do you think the winner of this game, whether it's Ohio State or Penn State, deserves to be top 2? Why or why not?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could make a deserves, yes. If you're going to say deserves, absolutely, because they would have a marquee win, right? Like that would be probably the best win in college football up to this point. If it's Ohio State, now you would have the Notre Dame victory, plus you would have a win over Penn State. If you're Penn State, you would have West Virginia, which I know people are looking at as their 2-loss team right now, one of those losses being to Penn State, and then you would have the Ohio State win. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense. Do I think that they would be the number 2 team in the nation? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I think in order for that to happen, they need some help from Georgia. I think Michigan rolls this weekend, and we'll see how Georgia is without Bowers. I think the committee seems, as long as those 2 teams keep winning and looking good, that they're not going to budge. Though I agree with you. Should they? Probably so, particularly Ohio State having beat Notre Dame. Okay, let's go over to the West. We spent a lot of time talking Ohio State, Penn State. 2 new coaches in the West made headlines this offseason. Matt Rule, head coach of Nebraska, your former coach, Luke Fickell, head coach of Wisconsin. Wisconsin is coming off a tough loss. They are 4-2. Nebraska coming off a bye week. They are 3-3. Let's talk about midseason grades. Where are you at with these two programs?
I think with Nebraska, I'm feeling probably like a C right now, right?
Okay.
Because I like the way their defense is playing, certainly. And those guys have kind of been the mentality. And when you can get the defense going like this, which they've been able to do, I think it puts you in a position to feel like you have chances in games. Now, we've also seen where the games start to get away from them a little bit, and that indicates that maybe some of the players haven't turned over the mentality from the Scott Frost era. Their offense is a huge problem to me, though, right? Like, you have so many glaring issues, right? Quarterbacks, really running backs, both of the guys who are playing. The run game has been good. You can't throw it at all. And I don't think the offensive line is as good as you would believe them to be based off of the run stats, because quarterback run is the equalizer there.
I'm laughing because this is the same argument we had with Iowa yesterday. You like good defense, but you hate bad offense.
I do.
And I'm saying, I came up with a B+ for Matt Rule.
Wow.
Because I think the context matters. The defense significantly improved.
Yes.
They're giving up over 100 yards less on the ground alone than last year. And that's implementing a new Tony White 3-3-5 scheme. I give them credit there. I also think about the context. When they lost to Minnesota this year, people said, man, is Nebraska cursed? Like, that's a hard thing to get off your back. That's on a head coach. And he's stayed true to be 500 at this point, even though it hasn't looked pretty. I give him credit. And I will say this. The quarterbacks, yes, they've been bad, but I also think that I give credit to Matt Rule, because it's hard to turn around a program when the quarterbacks played as poorly as they have.
Do we grade either of these guys maybe a little bit harder, considering that they also have to play in the West? Right? Like, if you put either one of these two teams in the Big Ten East.
We should.
Yeah.
So maybe we should give Loxley some bonus.
We saw what happened to Nebraska when they played against Michigan. I know Michigan's one of the greatest teams in the land, but that would be their reality every single year in the East, right? And I know divisions are going away, but I just wanted to bring that up. We got to grade Wisconsin. I'll let you go first on this one. Where are you at with them?
So I had Rule in Nebraska as a B+. I have Fickell as a B, just slightly underneath him.
Okay.
You?
I would say he's probably a B. I think the biggest thing that he missed on was Tanner Mordecai, right? Like, he was supposed to be a huge impact transfer, and he's so up and down. And I think it takes away from the run game that they had been good at. And I think their defense has played fine, but again, still trying to find their footing there. I would say B- maybe.
We're used to seeing Wisconsin as a top defense in the country. They've regressed slightly, and you bring in Mordecai, and that has taken away from your commitment to running the football. That's on coaching, so slightly below.
All right, we're going to take our first break right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner, but coming up, the Wolverines and the Spartans, they are getting ready to renew their rivalry, but is there a little added incentive after what went down last year? We got to get Jake's thoughts on that coming up after the break.
thought it was funny. You know, they got excited. It's good. You know, sometimes you get your little brother excited when you're playing basketball and stuff. Let him get the lead, and then you just come back and take it back.
They need to check themselves sometimes. But just remember, pride comes before the fall.
Do you think of Michigan State as your little brother?
Yep.
So they want to mock us all they want to mock us. I'm telling them it's not over. So they can print all that crap all they want all over their locker room. It's not over. It'll never be over here.
Well, both of those guys will be patrolling the sidelines there as Michigan takes on Michigan State this weekend. Mike Hart back there at Michigan as the running backs coach, and Mark D'Antonio in an advisory role for Michigan State as they're weathering this interim state that they're in. But you played in that rivalry.
Yeah.
We played in a rivalry as well, Ohio State, Michigan. And I feel like there was always a level of respect between us and, the coaching staffs and the players. But as I looked at Michigan State as an outsider, I always felt like you guys had legit hate.
Oh, yeah.
Am I right on that?
Oh, 100%. That's the number one question I get asked as a former Michigan football player. What's the difference between these two rivalries? And you laid it out perfectly. There is a mutual respect, even though, hey, make no mistake about it. We wanted to kick your ass. You wanted to kick our ass. We were prepared to get in a fight, and there was some fights, but there was an underlying, surrounding respect. When it came to Michigan State, respect is a word it's very subtle, if at all, right? Hatred is the word that is in all caps and is overwhelming. And we've seen that, right? We see the tunnel fight last year. Wow. We see those comments made by both sides. And when I say this, I don't say this as if it's a bad thing. I think people say, oh, well, hatred, maybe we need to change it. That's not good. No, I love games that require your utmost emotion. This game's exhausting because of the emotion. There's so much hatred involved. And as far as this game goes, Joshua, people say, hey, listen, Michigan is rolling, Michigan State's not rolling, of course. But I know one thing about Michigan State. Their season will be made if they can put the first loss on Michigan. Absolutely. And that comes from the hatred.
Yeah, hate is one of the best motivators. I say that all the time, and people look at me like I'm crazy. You got love, you got hate, and you got fear. The three greatest motivators out there. And for these teams, you're going to get whatever their best level is. Like Michigan State's going to play above what they have probably been this year. But Michigan, of course, is going to have a little bit to lean on from what happened in that tunnel last year, which is crazy. I wanted to ask you about winning Paul Bunyan. What does that mean to you?
Man, what it means is you won the day. What it means is you have a year of bragging rights. What it means is you don't have to face them. There's no worse feeling in the world than losing to them because you've got to hear it for a year. You win it, you get to be on the right side of that. So it means pretty much everything, man. I won there in 2016. I got a little mini Paul Bunyan trophy in my house, and it brings me joy every time I look at it.
Yeah, there's a look at Paul Bunyan right there. It's one of 16 rivalry trophies that exist in the Big Ten Conference. I think that's too damn many. So I wanted to play a little game with you, surprise you. We're going to show you some trophies here, and we want you to name the trophy, maybe what rivalry game it represents. So let's go ahead and pull the first one up here. I think you should be able to get this one.
Okay, this is Iowa versus This is Iowa versus Nebraska.
No.
Minnesota, Nebraska.
Yes, no, Minnesota, Iowa.
Minnesota, Iowa.
The Floyd of Rosedale, the name of the
I would have
pig.
never got that. Okay.
All right, let's advance to the next one here. This one you might be able to get.
Okay.
What trophy? What rivalry?
This is Nebraska.
No.
All right, I got no idea. What do you got here?
The old brass spittoon, that's Indiana and Michigan State.
Oh,
all right,
jeez.
advance. Let's get the next one up there. 0 for 2.
I didn't know there was a trophy game.
Here we go. All right, what is this one?
This has got to do something with Maryland then, right?
No.
What is this?
This is the Illabuck. Ohio State and Illinois play for this trophy.
This is the Illabuck?
The Illabuck Trophy. I have been a winner of this trophy. I played in the rivalry game.
I didn't know.
Jeez,
Iowa and Illinois is a trophy game.
All right.
What?
Can we at least get the last one up there? If we can skip over the fourth one. I know we're up against it time-wise, but I wanted to see if Jake would get this one. This is the final one.
This is Northwestern Michigan.
Okay.
This is Northwestern Michigan.
The George Jewett Trophy,
Yes.
one that I actually
You Beautiful
do.
trophy.
Like, yes, and,
Beautiful
and,
trophy.
You know, he was the guy that integrated either one of those squads there. So glad to have that as a trophy that is honored here in the Big Ten. Okay, we're going to take a break right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. Jake is going to regroup himself and learn about some more of these trophies. And when we come back, we're going to get with our guys from Rivals Down South for a little conference clash, maybe talk about some of the newcomers to each conference. Who's on the winning end of these transactions? We'll discuss. Time for the conference clash on Red Corner, Blue Corner, bringing in our guys T-Bob, A-Bear, SEC Mike joining us today. And we got a little conversation because we are in two of the growing conferences here. So we got to talk about the additions and maybe who made better additions. So you've got USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon joining us Midwesterners over here in the Big Ten. And then you've got Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC. I personally like what the West Coast schools are bringing to the Big Ten, but I'd like to open it up to you guys. Where you at on this?
I would say this. Look, I think that if you're going to add Washington, again, there's probably never been a better time than right now. So it's sexy for that. And look, Nike, I'm a Nike boy. Nike's cool. Oregon is Nike. That's a great brand. UCLA does nothing for me. UCLA does nothing for their own fans, though. Nobody shows up. And USC is kind of a brand as well. There's something to be said for the quantity of what the Big Ten is adding. But, Mike, what do you think? Is the quality of the SEC's too superior?
Yeah, the SEC literally could not have done better than to add 2 of the top, probably 8 programs in college football history. The geography makes sense. The fans, the traditions. I cannot wait to get that Cotton Bowl game as an SEC game. I will be down there. I didn't care about Texas and Oklahoma before. Now I love them. Now they're 2 of the best out there. I don't think the SEC could have done any better.
Hey, I will say, though, because we care about basketball here in the Big Ten Conference, UCLA is up there as one of the best basketball programs of all time, and the football team is climbing.
Well, and you know, they don't care right down there about Olympic sports and the health of just, you know, sports in general, but we've got teams with true Olympic history, like many Olympians coming in. I think that's really important there. Not to mention academics, which I know y'all don't give a damn about either. But as I look at these schools, though, from a football perspective, like you're totally right about Washington and being maybe a prisoner of the moment. But Washington's also one of the few schools that played in the 4-team college football playoff. Like Oregon played in a national title game in a 4-team college football playoff. Like, I think we ought to recognize that they're bringing some good football there. USC is a team that has a ton of football tradition. Maybe UCLA is kind of the outlier here, but if we're talking about football, I mean, we're doing pretty damn good too.
No, look, I agree. And to be clear, as long as Kalen DeBoer stays at Washington, like I think and Chris Peterson proved it as well, but Chris Peterson was just done coaching. Like I think that Washington can be a perennial power in modern football. I think we're talking about Texas and Oklahoma. I think it's interesting because it's almost a bit like Oregon and USC, even if Oregon doesn't have the history that Oklahoma does, in that like Oklahoma's definitely been the more successful football team recently and does have a great history. I mean, it's Oklahoma, USC, Ohio State, Notre Dame, who all have 7 Heisman winners in their history. And then, but Texas is weird because Texas is more of a brand than anything else, right? The winning has not been there. It's maybe back right now. But speaking of Texas, it's time to switch over to Little Rivals Down South. But kind of keep that going, right? Like Oklahoma adding more football history, Texas adding kind of some brand power. Because quite frankly, guys, Texas has been bad for a while now. Like they might be pretty good this year, but I'm not entirely sold. Joshua, Jake, y'all give us the kind of outside perspective on how you view the Sooners and the Longhorns.
So when I want to just stay with Texas in particular because that's the conversation we're having here. And the good thing about a big brand is it's the TV market. There's very little that's bad about adding a big brand, except for the risk that the expectations are sky high. And I say that because I know this as a Michigan guy. When I committed to the University of Michigan back in 2011, coming off a Sugar Bowl victory, Michigan's back, and then the program went like this. And that doesn't just affect Michigan. It affects the view of the conference as from an outside perspective. Because you say, wait a minute, this is one of your blue bloods? This is one of your best programs? What's going on there? Now, Texas did beat Alabama, and it looks like this year has a chance to be something special. But as you guys have kind of highlighted, it hasn't been that historically. So that's kind of my view and the risk on Texas, Joshua.
Yeah, I think Texas, the expectation level has been incongruent with what they actually have been as a program. And you mentioned it's because of the brand that they have and all the money that is flooded through the athletic department. I think people just believe that they should be a perennial contender. Part of this idea, too, is I think coaching, right? And Sark feels like he's the right guy, right? Like right now, it seems like they're building a program the right way. I think they missed on a lot of coaches, and most athletic departments do when they turn over coaches. It's like the most common thing that happens. I think it's what Oklahoma is starting to do as well. Brent Venables is proving that he's the right type of guy. And where I think this is an important conversation is when you're in the day and age of big money TV deals and spending, you can get coaches in and out pretty quickly. Like if you feel like you don't have the guy, you turn it over and you bring in a new guy and see if it works. And so these programs will have opportunities down the line to really solidify themselves. But I wanted to flip a question back to you guys, because the more I think about these teams that are coming in, you know, I'm looking at a Dylan Gabriel who feels like he's played college football for forever, and Quinn Ewers is one of the top draftable quarterbacks. Michael Penix Jr., same thing. Caleb Williams out the door. Bo Nix. Dante Moore is the only guy who feels like, you know, he's got some longevity there to really help enhance the profile of these teams. Does it worry you at all that we're going to be losing some of the great quarterbacks at these schools?
It doesn't worry me long term because that's all going to kind of ebb and flow, right? And so the brand power, the TV matchup of like Oklahoma versus Alabama is still going to be sexy, regardless of who the quarterback may be at the time. Now, granted, the quality may take a step back, and I want to be clear, dude. I'm a Sark hater. I was like Sark hater number one. Texas fans have made me eat an entire murder of crows after the T-Town game. Like that man's never even won 10 games. Like, let's let him win 10 games before he crown him. Maybe he's the answer. And I was kind of there with Venables as well. But again, Brent Venables doing good on the recruiting trail, and he got the big win. So we'll see. Again, I'm not sold on those coaches necessarily. I am sold on those brands. I want to go off script here for a second, though, boys, because we got Jim Harbaugh out here calling J.J. McCarthy the best quarterback in Michigan history. And it led me down a 20-minute wormhole. And my God, Jake. Where are all the quarterbacks?
Yeah, dude.
Y'all's quarterback history is awful. And where's the national championships? Why are they all pre or right around World War II? I can't support that. Like, are you Texas? What's going on here?
Look, hey, we got one in 97, though. I know it was a shared. The banner, I've seen it. It's in Ann Arbor.
How old were you in 97, real quick?
I was 2 years old in 97.
I was 3,
okay.
Just for everybody to know out there.
Listen, I'm going to earn some credibility here because I'm a realist, all right? I do love Michigan, but I am a realist. Quarterbacks have been one of the biggest issues, right? Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time, and he barely played at Michigan, right? He just has this small sample size. It's not like he was a Heisman candidate there. That's been the issue going back for a decade. So, you know, if you want to compare it to what Lincoln Riley does or Alabama or Ohio State, some of these schools with great college quarterbacks, the bar is pretty low. But I will say JJ is special even outside of that context, in my opinion. And Coach Harbaugh is not a guy that just hands out compliments. He's a great quarterback in his own right. I think he's being pretty realistic about JJ. He thinks he is that special.
I love what he's saying about JJ because I think it is true. I think he could go down as the best quarterback that Michigan's ever had. I think it's when Jim Harbaugh gets to Caleb Williams, J.J. McCarthy, it's like Jordan and LeBron. I'm going to have to pump the brakes on that.
Caleb helped us with that last week, though. Caleb helped us.
Because his 3 interceptions came against Notre Dame when JJ's came against Bowling Green, right? Neither here nor there. But I think that he is one of the biggest reasons why they've been able to ascend. Defensively, I think that they have a great system, and those guys play really hard. Offensive line's built. They've got the running backs. But having a quarterback like J.J. McCarthy is the reason why people think, and the reason why I believe that they are a national championship contender.
Yeah, look, so that's the craziest part about it is like J.J. McCarthy is guaranteed going to have the best statistical season of all time at Michigan. It's just whether or not they win the Natty. Jake, one more thing before you go. What you got?
What has hurt Michigan is the scheme. Like, when I got there, our quarterback stat line is almost as we view Iowa. Like, our quarterbacks would be like 9 for 14 for 120 yards, 1 touchdown, and 0 interceptions. And we were running fullback dive like 8 times a game. Now that what you would really hope if you're Jim is to take this momentum of JJ and start to make this a year in, year out thing, even outside of him.
Yeah, look, I played for a Michigan man myself in Les Miles, Jake.
That's
right.
right.
I get it.
That's right.
I get it. A lot of power toss, baby. All right, Joshua. All right, Jake. Y'all take it easy. Those are the red quarter, blue quarter guys. SEC Mike, it's time for me and you to dive into some Week 8 SEC games. We'll holler at y'all later this week, and here we go. Mississippi State, Arkansas, a couple of teams in desperate need of a win. A little ranked-on-ranked matchup in T-Town. I love it. Mizzou trying to continue their ascent against a South Carolina team that is floundering. Auburn, Ole Miss, tricky spot here for Ole Miss. And then LSU taking on the Armed Forces, Army. Of course, I've always been more of a naval fan myself, SEC Mike, so I'm fully ready to dominate Army this weekend. But let's start with Tennessee, Alabama. the matchup going down in T-Town. And Mike, for those that don't know, Mike hosts that SEC podcast, highest rated SEC podcast on all platforms. And he is a Tennessee man himself. And he was a little worried about Jimbo Fisher coming to town last week. And I just want to say congrats, Mike. Y'all did it. You held serve. It was ugly, but you found a way to win, dude.
Yeah, and I'm just glad the Vols let everybody in the nation know what I already know, that Jimbo's a clown. Get him out of here. The rest of the SEC, they're probably rooting for Jimbo to stay in College Stations.
True.
Maybe year 7, maybe year 8 is the year for Jimbo. But I am nervous about this Alabama game, T-Bob, because I just don't think that kind of style, I don't think you could beat Bama, and I don't think you could beat Georgia running the ball and playing defense, because that's what Georgia and Alabama are built upon. I think you got to throw the rock. You got to beat them one-on-one down the field. And that is just something that we've not seen this season for Josh Heupel's Tennessee Vols.
So me coming from the LSU Nation, you from Tennessee, we are people that have suffered under the heel of Crimson oppression. We've talked about it before. LSU went about, I think, 8 or 9 years without beating them following that natty loss. For Tennessee, I know it was longer. What would it mean to the Volunteer faithful if Tennessee can make it 2 years in a row against the Tide?
Well, bring a big smile to my face, T-Bow, because I've been calling this the decaying dynasty there in Tuscaloosa for the better part of a year. And I think this would drive that stake into Nick Saban's dynasty. Because if you can't beat this Tennessee team at home, how in the world are you going to beat this red-hot LSU offense in a couple weeks? How in the world are you going to beat the Georgia Bulldogs, which I've said on national television, I think Georgia win by about 4 touchdowns over Alabama. I think they'll be dead. They'll lose 3-4 games on the season, Alabama will, if they can't beat this Tennessee team, because they got some tougher games upcoming. So, yeah, I would certainly be glad if they could do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know what? Let's unite our forces, Mike. And here's to hoping that Heupel and Kelly can both make it 2 in a row against the Tide. Next up, we got a battle of the bads, and it's Mississippi State and Arkansas. Both teams winless in conference right now, but for very different reasons. Let's be painfully clear about Arkansas. They have played maybe the hardest schedule in the entire country. Like, they have faced 4 top 20 S&P plus teams in a row. I think they've only lost by a combined 24. Sam Pittman, yes, his seat is getting hot. Yes, the Sharks are circling, but Arkansas needs to be a bit careful here, right? Like, that said, I think Zach Arnett, I think Arnett's already a dead man walking. I think Mississippi State's done with Arnett. He took what was a team that finished 9-4 last year under Mike Leach and won the Egg Bowl and had momentum and had exciting offense and had a quarterback that was going to break all of Aaron Murray's SEC records. He took that thing and he just dismantled it. And it's crumbled in front of Bulldogs fans' eyes. So in terms of who needs this more, I already think Zach Arnett's dead. So I think it's Sam Pittman.
Yeah, and I honestly think, T-Bob, that the losing coach in this game, to your point, will not be back next season. And I have heard the same things. I mean, I think Zach Arnett is on a very, very short leash there in Starkville. These two teams right now, T-Bob, they're combined 0 for 7 in SEC play. And I realize people look down on them. They think little old Mississippi State and Arkansas. But how about this? I believe Georgia and maybe Alabama, but beyond those two, Mississippi State's got the longest bowl streak in the SEC. This is not little old Mississippi State of years old. This is a proud program that bottom line expects making a bowl game. They're not going to make it if they lose this game. And the same thing with Arkansas. I mean, the high expectations, won 9 games just 2 years ago. We cannot be losing 6 games in a row here for the Arkansas Razorbacks. So must win for both these coaches.
The thing is, I don't think it's a hard decision for Mississippi State. There's awful circumstances that led to Zach Arnett getting the job in the first place. Like, avoid the sunken cost fallacy. Just cut bait and move on and get an exciting coach. There's there's a lot. Like, what about like a Willie Fritz from Tulane or something? I don't know. Time will tell. Next up in Jordan Hare, Ole Miss. Ole Miss right now, look, they're not in an awful spot, right? They could cheer for Alabama to maybe catch an SEC loss somewhere along the way. I guess they'd have to catch two, but whatever. Ole Miss 13th in the country right now, pretty good. Traveling to Jordan-Hare. And we saw what Auburn did against Georgia when they got to play at home, right? 28-20, a battle that Auburn had the lead for the majority of the game. It's a different Auburn team when you're playing over there as opposed to, well, let's say Death Valley. Do you think has Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss arrived at a place where they can go into that environment and walk away with a win, especially with the added narrative context of Lane Kiffin turning down Auburn to remain at Ole Miss this past offseason?
Right, and additional bad blood, T-Bob, between Kiffin and Hugh Freeze. They've been stealing each other's players, stealing each other's coaches. There is no love loss here between these two. And I call Lane Kiffin, I call him Lane Whiffen for a reason. So I'm right there with you. I mean, I think this is a very losable game for Ole Miss. They are the only SEC team on the road this weekend that is a favorite. And I think that's fair. I'm not saying they shouldn't be favored, but I think Auburn can catch Ole Miss. I really do think that this is one that Hugh Freeze and company have circled. If they're going to make a bowl game, they may have to pull an upset at the tail end of the season here, and this is the one that I really like. So I think this is a four-quarter dogfight. I really do.
Never forget, Auburn has a belief that is unparalleled in the SEC, maybe save for the culty behaviors of Texas A&M and their yell leaders. Otherwise, you're not going to find a more zealous fan base than the Auburn Tigers. That place is going to be loud. It's going to be crazy. And we're going to see how real this Ole Miss team is. All right, coming up next, it is the midweek point of the season, which means it's time for midterms. That's right. We are college football. Remember those in college? We're going to get out some grades when we get back here on Rivals Down South. Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to Rivals Down South here on Watch Stadium. Sam Breeve in the chat says Bama's front seven's good enough to stop that Tennessee rush attack plus revenge for last year, right? Yeah, Sam, you're probably right, but we'll wait and see. Let's go ahead and give out our midterm grade for the SC West. Let's start with the Alabama Crimson Tide, and this is a tough one for me. I'm going to go B plus, Mike. And the reason is this is not exactly where Alabama fans are used to being, already a home double-digit loss in the schedule. But I do think if we're willing, like we're not great on the offseason. I'm just great on this year. If you look at where they felt like they were versus South Florida to where they feel like they are now, that's actually a pretty damn successful job by Nick Saban finding ways to win games as they're making mistakes all over the field. They're not unstoppable anymore. I'm going to go B plus here.
I'm going to go B minus. I'm a little bit tougher
Okay.
grader than you, but everything you said, yeah, defense is great, but the offense, not knowing what the heck to do with Jalen Milroe. There's been coaching drama. That's why Lane Kiffin made those comments. There's things going on behind the scenes. So, yeah, I've not been overly impressed, and I think Alabama should have 2 losses by now, and I think they may have one upcoming.
Okay, next up, the LSU Tigers. Again, maybe I'm too close to this situation. I should be like taking off the case or something. I'll leave that to SEC Mike, the police chief. But I'm going B minus here. Because look, the bottom line is if you're Brian Kelly, you end last year by winning the West, winning 10 games, and then you come out after the entire offseason of hype and you get dominated by Florida State. You've turned out the worst defense in the entirety of the Power Five. You drop a game to Ole Miss and old Whiffin Kiffin. But the saving grace here to keep you in the B range is simply that you have objectively the best offense in the entire country and maybe the guy who should be leading the Heisman. So I'll go B minus here.
I'm going C because
Okay,
I think you
fair.
nailed it, T-Bob. I mean, national championship offense, FCS level defense. So I don't know. I'm just averaging out at A and an F, so I give you a C. But there's still a lot in front of LSU. Just improve that defense just a little bit, and they could be the SEC West champion, believe it or not.
Look, grades are a function of expectation, which is why I'm giving Ole Miss an A minus right now. When you think about Ole Miss this season, Lane Kiffin got a ranked win over Tulane, which granted some of y'all may be like, whatever, but it still, there's not many of those in Ole Miss's school history, right? And then he gets the kind of signature win, holds court at home. They're down 9 with 5 minutes left against LSU. Classic Ole Miss. They should have crumbled. They didn't. They find a way to win that game. I still think there's a crumble coming, but outside of that Alabama blemish, Ole Miss fans have got to be ecstatic with how this year's gone.
And I'm going B because Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, they're dead to me since they lost that game to Alabama. And maybe that's not fair, but after running their mouth for all week and to have that egg, yeah, I get it. You're right. They beat Tulane. Yeah, clap for you. But they gotta make it up somewhere. Beat Georgia, something like that, to make up for that Alabama game before I'm back on and giving them an A.
What letter does Jimbo Fisher's last name start with? F. And that's exactly what I'm giving the Texas A&M Aggies, more like assies. They're so bad. They're so disappointing. Every time you believe in him, they let you down. They're 0-10 as underdogs, 5-15 on the road. He's significantly worse than Kevin Sumlin. Awful job by Texas A&M.
Yeah, well, this one I'll do a little bit better. I'll give him a D because I think the defense has shown some stuff. They just lost to the mighty Tennessee Vols. I can forgive that. I do not forgive them for losing at home to Alabama and that Miami one. That was a debacle. But yeah, I give him a D.
When it comes to Auburn, I think it's a C. Hugh Freeze in a bit of a holding pattern this year. Let him figure out the quarterback situation. Auburn's going to be good again. You wait.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair.
Yeah. All right. Coming up next, let's shift over to the SEC East. Get your grades in the chat as well. Keep it locked right here on Watch Stadium. Rivals down south. Yo, what up, y'all? Welcome back to Rivals Down South. Me and SC Mike chopping it up, giving some grades out of the SEC East. All right, Mike, start with the UGA Bulldogs. I got him at a C, okay? C for championship. When you are a championship contender, you're going to be graded harder, and the bottom line is they've been average as hell this year. Give me a C for the Bulldogs.
I thought I was being harsh. I was giving them a B. And it's only like you said, because they're graded on a curve. They've not been elite. They've not been awful, but I think a B is fair. But sure, give them a C. That's fine.
B for Powers. Well, not anymore. Tennessee, I'm going to give Tennessee a B here. I know you're probably upset about what happened in the Swamp. I would be as well. But again, Tennessee's tracking to be maybe like 9-3, second best in the East. After the last 15 years, I think that's huge, Mike.
Yeah, that's a great. I was going to give them 2 and credit the coaching staff for basically doing a 180. We went from an offensive powerhouse to a defensive powerhouse that runs the ball. So, hey, they're working with what they got. I think a B. You can't go any higher.
For Mizzou, it's an A- for me. Maybe the most interesting kind of feel-good team of the SEC thus far this year. Explosive offense, Brady Cook, Luther Burden kicking ass. The fans coming alive in Como. Give me an A- for the Tigers.
I'd go a little bit higher, A. And I think old Eli Drinkwitz, he went from the outhouse to the penthouse, because I think right now he's SEC Coach of the Year, and he came into the season with on the hottest seat. So he's doing a great job.
When you look at the Kentucky Wildcats, Mike, and I don't think I'm being too harsh here, though maybe the Florida win would say that I am. But I kind of want to give Kentucky an F. No, so I'm going to do it. I'm giving Kentucky an F. Look, it's the second year in a row where Kentucky's supposed to be good, right? Last year, they returned Will Levis. They got Chris Rodriguez coming back. Oh, but we didn't have Liam Cohen. The offensive line was bad. Okay. So then this year, they get Liam Cohen back. You bring in Devin Leary, maybe the most like exciting addition of the offseason. He was awesome 2 years ago at NC State. You're calling your offensive line the Big Blue Wall. You beat Florida, and you're nothing but a disappointment since that point. And losing at home in the manner that you did to Mizzou, in which you had a 14-point lead and were dominating the game, is an abject disaster, especially on the heels of like, we don't have as much money as Georgia. Okay, do you have as much money as Mizzou? Mark Stoops, that's an F for me, dog.
I'm going C- because I get it. Yeah, very disappointing last weekend. Georgia, that was to be expected, but they could still rally. They get Tennessee and Alabama at home, and if they can win either one of those, it's a good year for Kentucky.
For Florida, I'm going B- here. B is for Billy, but S is for sleep, and P is for pillow. And I'll be damned. It looked like them pillows helped out. They found a way to go to Columbia, get a big win. Anytime Billy Neighbor gets a road win, that should be celebrated. B- for Florida.
Yeah, B for boring Billy and the style of his play. But hey, they won, so let's give them credit for credit's due. Last week on the road, like you said, but they've been embarrassed this season too. So tough grade, but I think B's fair.
All right, there it is, your SEC midterm grades. T-Bob Hebert, SEC Mike hanging out with you. We'll be back tomorrow right here on Watts Stadium for some more Rivals Down South. Remember, you can join us in the YouTube chat every single day. We love you. We'll see you tomorrow for some more college football.